groups dealing with infrastructure in the different countries of the world and its financing. CICA, for decades, has been working on PPPs and long-term financing of infrastructure. This group merged some years ago under the leadership of Roger Fisselson and myself. Since then, we have organized joint webinars with the Inter-American Federation FIIC, and for a year we have the help and participation of similar working groups of the European Federation FIEC. In the last year, we have organized meetings with Eric Lancelot of the World Bank and Vincent Pigon, consultant creator of GLOPRAM, regular collaborator of CICA, on the impact of infrastructure maintenance. Last December, we had an interesting webinar on the application of new technologies to infrastructure activity with the participation of Aiga Stockenberger from the World Bank, a representative of Alteia, a specialist in satellite imagery and artificial intelligence applied to the survey of infrastructure assets, Jean Ramirez from the High-Lodi Group, Matija Cernik from JC Grange, and Blanca Payas from Sixth Sense, who presented applications of the latest technology to the organization of SMEs companies, to production, and to the control of works, respectively. The objective has always been to invite experts, listen to their experience and opinions, exchange ideas, always seeking to favor and enable investment in infrastructure, make visible the importance of infrastructure and its adequate maintenance for the productivity of the region and the well-being of the community served by the asset. Today, we are happy to present two experts who will talk to us about the economic impact of infrastructure. We thank Fernando Bernaya and Jean-François Vivier for their participation today. We begin by introducing Fernando Bernaya, lawyer, founder of the Bernaya and Pereira law firm, advisor to the Brazilian Chamber of Construction, CIBIC, and member of some of the CICA mission to Washington for the visit to the Multilateral Credit Organization. Dear Fernando, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Fernando. First of all, I would like to thank CICA for the invitation. And I'd like to say that there is a great pleasure to be here to participate in this webinar to talk about the Brazilian strategies to address the maintenance of its road network. I'm going to ask you a minute to share my presentation. Just a minute. Do you see my screen?
Not yet.
Not yet, yeah. I always have a problem with this. Just a minute, please. And now, can you see my screen?
No.
Not yet.
Sorry. Here is saying that system is blocking screen share session due to denied permissions.
Do you want me to share your presentation, Fernando? If you send it to me, I can share it for you.
Thank you, Fanny. I'm gonna send you. I'm gonna try one more time, please. What about now? Do you see my screen?
No.
No.
No. Okay, I'm gonna send you my presentation. I'm gonna send it by email, okay?
Yes.
Sorry about that.
No worries.
Maybe I'll take the opportunity then to maybe just say some words about FIEC's work while we are still waiting for Ondine to receive the presentation from Fernando. But we have it already, so maybe I'll just give the floor back.
Do you see my screen now? Or?
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Yes, but is in presenting mode. How do you see?
We can see, your entire screen. Now it's perfect.
Okay, I'm sorry about this technical problem. Today I'm gonna talk about this, as I said, the strategies that Brazilian government has been adopting, especially in the recent years, to maintain its road network. My approach here will be from a legal perspective, from a perspective of whom has worked as a legal consultant in public procurement during the last 30 years. Here in the first slide, we have a quick introduction about the overview of the maintenance of the paved road network in Brazil. As you see, the federal road network has 65,000 kilometers, and there are approximately 150,000 kilometers of subnational road that are under administration of the states and the municipalities. 22% of the federal network is operated by private companies through concessions and PPP contracts. So for this 20%, the road maintenance is provided by private operators, given the fact that their responsibility is incorporated in these contracts. In the other 78% of the road network, approximately, is under federal government responsibility. I'd like to mention that in the next couple of years, this percentage tends to change significantly because Brazilian government has already announced that in 2025, 15 new road concessions will be bid. Just to give you a reference about these numbers, Brazil has at this point 26 concession contracts in operation, and in 2024, the federal government bids 7 new concessions, and government is announcing now that we will award 15 new ones only in 2025, according to its pipeline of projects. So that is very significant, right? Because we just have 26 right now, but in the next year, probably we will have more, 15 new concessions. So what we can expect for the next years is a reduction of the portion of the road network, which is currently under federal government responsibility, that will be incorporated in the new concession contracts. But currently, there is just around 20% of the network incorporated in concessions operations in Brazil. And there are two different entities in Brazil that are managing the road network, the federal road network. We have ANTT.
I think we lost Fernando.
Budget, meaning that the investment and costs necessary to construct and to maintain the road infrastructure are supported by the users, as you know, by the tariff revenues. And we have, on the other hand, the DNIT. DNIT is a federal department inside the federal government that is in charge of the maintenance of the portion of the road network that is under federal government responsibility. And the DNIT has adopted in the recent years basically two different strategies to provide the maintenance of this portion of the road network. Traditional contracts, we call PATO, PATO, that responds for 91.4% of the federal road network. And the NIT also adopts CREMA contracts, which are a more sophisticated contract model with a broader scope, long-term contracts, and which are considered performance-based contracts. This model of contract was introduced in the Brazilian experience with the World Bank support in the late 90s, beginning of 2000. And they have been improved during the years, especially in the subnational level. We are now in the third edition of CREMA contracts in Brazil. Although currently they are underused in Brazilian experience in the federal level, because only 3.5% of the federal road network maintenance has been addressed by this type of contract. So here I would like to explain very briefly the main differences between these contract models. So firstly, regarding of their scopes, CREMA contracts, of course, as I said, are more sophisticated in comparison to the traditional contracts, in the sense that it has a broader and more complex scope. While the traditional contracts are based only on the rehabilitation of the pave, usually in the surface of the road, we usually call them pothole filling contracts. The CREMA contracts involve the responsibility of implementing a more structural intervention in the road, and also involves the maintenance during the contract period. The contractor obligation to pursue a more proactive maintenance of the road based on performance indicator. That is very important characteristic of CREMA contracts, because CREMA contracts were introduced in the Brazilian experience as a performance-based contract with the support of the World Bank, as I said before. That's why CREMA contracts terms are longer than the traditional one. The traditional contracts last just 1 year, given the simplicity of the scope, while CREMA models are usually middle-term contracts. It can be long-term contracts in some cases in a form of CREMA PPP. We will explain it in the next slides. But their duration has varied along the Brazilian experience with this type of contract. In the first Brazilian edition of CREMA, the contract period was 5 years, comprising 1 to 2 years focused on the rehabilitation, including here resurfacing, drainage, improvements and structural repairs. And the rest period covering routine maintenance according to the predefined levels of services, what we call performance indicators. But later, it was realized that 5 years wasn't enough time to ensure long-term responsibility that could improve the efficiency related to the road maintenance. So the new editions of CREMA have provided a contract duration from 8 to 10 years, and it could be more than that, depending on the CREMA format, on the CREMA model. If it is a CREMA PPP, it can be between 15 to 25 years, depending on the modeling of the contract. Regarding the design project, when it comes to the design, the traditional contracts do not require a design project to be signed or to be performed. On the other hand, CREMA contracts require a more detailed design project to be bid. Yeah. But even then, as being a performance-based contract, their scopes involve improvements and detail the design project. That's the philosophy behind the performance-based contracts. I would like to clarify that according to the previous Brazilian public procurement legislation, there were restrictions for the government to bid a contract like CREMA without a full or complete design project. There was a legal limitation for public administration to design a contract or to bid a CREMA contract without a complete design project. But this restriction was suppressed, was overcome by the current public procurement legislation that entered into effect in 2021. According to this new legislation, I can say, the public administration is allowed to transfer to the private constructor the obligation of building the design project detail. And this is very important when it comes to the performance-based contracts, because in this, as you know, in this type of contract, the focus should be in the outputs, in meeting the outputs, the outputs indicator or performance indicators. The idea behind this model of contract is to obtain from the private sector the more efficient technical choices, creating incentives for the contractor to choose the most efficient ways to deliver the outputs that are defined by performance indicators. The other aspect here is related to the costs. Of course, CREMA tends to be more costly model contract for the public administrations, at least in a short term, right? In comparison to the traditional contracts due to its broader scope. And again, CREMA is a performance-based contracts, and while the traditional contracts are not performance-based contracts, and in which, in case of CREMA, the payment system is linked two performance indicators. The contractor remuneration varies according to the meeting of performance indicators. That is an important feature of the CREMA model, as I said before.
Fernando, sorry
Yes.
to interrupt you. We cannot really see the slides. It's a bit blurred. So maybe if you put down the camera, maybe it will work better.
Sorry, can you say before? Can you say it again? Sorry, funny.
We cannot, your slides, they are blurred. I think it's because of your internet connection. So maybe if you shut down your camera, it will work better.
Okay. Just a minute, please. Oh, sorry. Okay, do you see my screen?
Yes, we still can see your screen, but it's still blurred.
Okay, still blurred.
And then you should share your edition of the.
But it was good a few seconds ago. It was clearer.
No.
Well, maybe Fernando, if you can send your slides to me.
This is a clear demonstration that the infrastructure is needed everywhere, especially the communication
Especially in Brazil.
and data infrastructure.
You are
This
very
is
right.
a common claim from our audience.
Okay, let's try it again. Do you see my screen?
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Clearly now.
Okay,
Yes, it's
thank
clear.
you.
Thank you.
Yes.
I have some minutes yet, right? To finish the presentation.
Yes. You can follow up, Fernando.
So here you have a comparison between CREMA DBM, CREMA PPP, and the simplified concession. CREMA DBM and CREMA PPP are the new CREMA models that are under implementation in Brazil with the support of the World Bank. And the simplified concession is a program that Brazilian federal government is developing at this time. First of all, in terms of scope, the CREMA DBM involves final design, rehabilitation, maintenance, while CREMA PPP and the simplified concessions involve not only the design, detailing the rehabilitation and the maintenance, but also the financing, the construction financing. That is the main difference between CREMA PPP simplified concession in comparison to CREMA DBM. DBM means design, build, and maintain. In terms of the contract duration, the CREMA DBM has 8 to 10 years contract period, while the CREMA PPP, that is a government-based PPP, and the concession, that is a user space PPP, have a longer term, 18 to 25 years, depending on the case. Of course, those contracts, these three models are performance-based contracts, as I mentioned before. In terms of the public budget commitment, CREMA PPP is considered a budget-funded contract because the contractor remuneration comes entirely from public budget, from public payments, in the sense that there are no tariffs or users' payment integrated in the payment mechanism. In CREMA PPP, there is a possibility of tariffs revenue, depending on the case. I would like to concession model type of long-term contract in which the payment mechanism is based on the tariff system. It is considered a self-sustainable contract, economically speaking, in the sense that the tariffs revenues are enough to cover the investments and the operation costs involved in the construction and the operation of infrastructure. Apart from the classic concession, there are a PPP model in Brazil, which is very similar to the classic concession, but the difference is that the payment mechanism in a PPP, it is always integrated with public payments. Public payments are integrated in the payment mechanism in order to subsidize the project, because this project are not self-sustainable projects. In some cases, the public payments cover just a part of the costs and investments, which is called sponsored concession. That's the technical terminology in Brazil. In other cases, the public payment is responsible for covering the total amount of investment and costs. In this case, there are no tariffs, which we call in Brazil administrative concession. The technical terminology is administrative concession. So in Brazil, we have classic concession, that is a self-sustainable contract, economically speaking. We have sponsored concession, that is a type of PPP, in which there are tariffs, revenues, but also there are public payments integrated in the remuneratory system. And we have an administrative concession in which the concessionary remuneration comes entirely from public payments. There is no tariff integrated in the remuneratory system. So in terms of the budgetary aspects, CREMA DPM is considered a budget-funded contract. CREMA PPP is considered a budget-funded contract as well. But in some cases, public payments can be reduced as the tariffs payments are integrated in the contract, also depending on the modeling. So here we have an example of CREMA PPP project that was implemented in the state of Bahia with the support of the World Bank. This is a well-succeed project. The duration is 20 years, and its total value is approximately $2,073 million. There was a sponsored concession. That was the type of the PPP that was applied. Its scope involves toll payments and public resources. And here the private partner is responsible for the operation, maintenance, and revitalization of the road, and also a construction of a bridge over the São Francisco River. One key feature of this project is the climate resilience. That is a key important, it's a key point in terms of structuring the new CREMA contracts that has been structured in Brazil with the World Bank support. Yeah, this climate resilience is reflected not only in the performance indicators, but also in the technical assessments during the bidding process. Here, there are some reasons why CREMA contracts in Brazil responds for a very small part of the road network, especially in federal in the federal road network. Although they are important initiatives of CREMA in Brazil, especially in subnational level contract, unfortunately, I would say, responds for a small part of the federal paved network. And I think there are two reasons that explain this failure of or the underuse of CREMA model. One of them is the budgetary policies, public administrations in Brazil, not only in the federal level, but also in subnational level as well, are facing fiscal restriction at this point. And CREMA contracts are usually costly for the governments, at least in a short term, as I said before. Probably this is the main cost that has limited the use of CREMA model in Brazil. Another cause has to do with the legal restrictions that I mentioned before, related to the duration and to the performance-based contracts. Those were, and from my understanding, overcome by the new legislation, as I mentioned before. Here we have a survey that was conducted by the Brazilian National Confederation of Transports in 2024 that shows that the private operation has been more effective in providing road maintenance in comparison to the public management. This survey showed good numbers for the road maintenance under concession, much better, as we can see, than the ones under DNIT responsibility. I think that is a good context. We have, at this point, a good context to favor the expansion of the private operation in the road maintenance in Brazil. And just to conclude, this is the final slide. What to expect for the next years and what the main challenges are. At federal level, we can expect concessions, the big concessions, as I said before. We are expecting 15 new ones for 2025. Second strategy will be the simplified concessions. Federal government is implementing a simplified concession program focused only on rehabilitation and maintenance with low capex, with low investments, and a shorter term in comparison to the full concession contracts, around 12 years. This is what they are calling a simplified concession, focused only on the maintenance of the road. Third, CREMA PPP. This will be the cases in which there is no feasibility for the tariffs payments to cover all the costs and investments due to limited traffic levels. This type of PPP can be CREMA-sponsored concessions, as I said before, or a CREMA administrative concession, in which there will be only public payments. And the fourth one is the CREMA DBN. The CREMA DBN used for cases in which the scope is not large enough for a PPP, and the duration can be shorter, such as 8 to 10 years. Main challenges here are a macroeconomic environment, given the fact that Brazil is facing the raise of interest rates at this moment. The inflation is always a problem. Now, at this point, the inflation in Brazil is under control, but it's always been a critical concern in terms of long-term projects. And the volatility of the current exchange, how to address the current exchange risk. This is a critical problem as well. But I think the recent PPP and concession contracts have been succeeding in addressing this kind of risk. And of course, the fiscal constraints for those projects that depend on the public budget. At subnational level, we also have concessions under developing and CREMA DBM and CREMA PPP. World Bank is supporting many states in preparing these projects. And the challenges, here we have the challenges related to the lack of capacity of some public administrations in preparing those projects. Fiscal constraints, of course, is a problem because subnational administrations are facing fiscal restrictions as well. And there is also a concern about the capacity of subnational agencies in overseeing and in conducting the contract performance in the long term. So those are the main aspects that I wanted to bring here. That is what I had to say. Thank you again for the invitation. Again, it was a pleasure to participate. Thank you.
Thank you, Fernando. I would like to say that in our last visit to Washington, to the World Bank, we were told that the World Bank was supporting the CREMA program in Brazil because they have evaluated that there was a savings for the users of about 25% of the real whole cost, comparing the CREMA maintained roads against the public maintenance of roads. So considering not only the budgetary cost, but also the cost of users and better standing or level of service of the well-maintained roads, the economical effect of the CREMA program was good, was so good that the World Bank was supporting this with his financial support. With this, I open the floor. If there is any question, any doubt, if not, we continue with Alfonso and the next presentation. Andine, yes, Andine.
Yeah, thank you, Fernando. It was just to say that because of time constraint, we should directly go to Alfonso and then do the questions at the end, maybe.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. I will be brief before I pass the floor to our guest speaker, Jean-François Vivier. Thank you to CICA and to FIIC. This is the second such online event that we organized together. The first one was quite successful, which was the webinar on artificial intelligence and satellites for predictive maintenance of infrastructure, which Fernando already mentioned during his introductions. For FIEC, as many are aware, one of the key messages or one of the priorities which we've identified and we always try to convince decision makers is that investment in infrastructure should be put at the forefront of the agenda, also for environmental reasons, safety reasons, and of course for reasons of competitiveness as well. We have FIEC two working groups that are dedicated to the issue of infrastructure. The first one is one on the infrastructure it deals with financing. So it's chaired by Dominique Bouillot, who is attending this meeting. And in this working group, we've dealt with several issues, such as the proposal for updated guidelines for the Trans-European Transport Network, which is a very important issue for contractors in Europe. We will have to start having discussions on the next multi-annual financial framework, which will be put in place in 2028 and goes until 2034. We need to start campaigning, for a stronger budget and a more ambitious EU budget that to finance infrastructure projects on the continent. We've also have another working group that is on structural maintenance. The focus of this working group has mainly been on bridges. It's chaired by, for those who know, by Christian Pridon, and who is also organizing the next Eurobridge conference, which will take place in April. I think it's the 5th of April, but Ondine will correct me if I'm wrong. 11th, sorry. It's on the 11th. But of course, it's also going to expand its focus a bit to other types of infrastructure. And since Fernando mentioned in his presentation the topic of public procurement and the new framework that is in place in Brazil, the current framework in Europe, which has been in place since 2014, is set to be revised very, very soon. And it's also an important topic as it specifies the requirements under which contractors compete for public contracts. So now I will pass the floor to Jean-François Vivier, who works for SAD, who is a French public works company. He is the International Operations Director at SAD. He has been there for 7 years, if I'm not mistaken, and he has several years, over 15 years of experience in the field, in the water pipeline industry, and also was active in many territories such as France, Africa, and so on. But I will now give the floor to Jean-François, who can
Thank you,
finish the introduction. And yes, the floor is yours.
Perfect. Thank you very much for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be there. So the aim of my talk is to answer mainly two questions: how to finance differently water infrastructure projects, and what should be the priority amongst water infrastructure projects. So to do so, I will refer to private financing, DERU 2, and the Blue Deal. So first of all, private financing, PPP, of water infrastructure. So today, global warming, demographic expansion, increasing urbanization are challenges to be met. They all require huge investment in water-related infrastructure. However, most countries in the world do not have sufficient budgetary resources to meet these investments, including in developed countries. Significant financial resources could be mobilized by the private sector, for example, via pension funds or infrastructure funds. However, it must be noted that in practice, numerous obstacles strongly limit the use of these private funds. So the situation condemns many projects, although profitable, to not being realized, which deprives our companies of a very significant activity, worth several tens of billions of euros each year. It is therefore necessary to examine the multiple causes of the situation and propose solutions to ease the private investment for infrastructures. Overseas, it could be interesting to use the Global Gateway Initiative, which aims to be the EU response to China, One Belt, One Road. It will finance 300 billion euros of investment for sustainable and high-quality projects between 2021 and 2027. In 2023, 90 key projects were launched worldwide in many sectors, including infrastructure. So, in which way could we use the global gateway to facilitate private investment in infrastructure? For example, one of the main problems is that many private funds require counterparties with a minimum rating of A to invest. In emerging countries, the needs are huge and few countries and even less communities comply to this request, which leads to the need to use credit insurance to guarantee investors. But investment in infrastructure, in most cases, are amortized over a period of up to 30 years, periods considered far too long in the world of this credit insurer, which are limited in the base case to 10 to 15 years maximum. And this is considerably reduces the numbers of projects potentially financeable by private funds. The Global Gateway Initiative could decide to set up a guarantee fund which would take over from credit insurance or which would replace it if necessary. This would allow a very significant leverage effect, and the European Union, with a constant budget, could contribute more significantly and faster to the realization of more infrastructure projects in the beneficiary countries. For our companies, this would provide additional export growth potential, which would be good for us. So now I'm going to move to DERU 2, a different approach for answering partially the second question. The revised European directive about wastewater and stormwater came into force at the beginning of January 2025, so this year. For European companies, different impacts should be considered. First of all, development of activities. Most of cities between 1,000 to 2,000 equivalent inhabitants must have a wastewater network and wastewater treatment plant. It was already the case for cities, but over 2,000 equivalent inhabitants. Most of existing wastewater treatment plants must improve their performances. Problem links to stormwater, such as flooding or pollution, must be analyzed and adequate plans should be established. Technical solutions are available and have already been used successfully, as in the cities of Paris and Nîmes in France, for flooding prevention. Secondly, maintenance. The lack of waterproofing of old wastewater stormwater network is the main cause of contamination of natural environments, like water table, by contaminated water. It's surprising that the obligation to check existing network and to repair them if they are leaking is the great absence of the directive DERU 2. It would have been more efficient with the same budget to repair leaking network than to improve by a few percent the quality of treated wastewater. So overall, a rational maintenance policy, which would include preventive maintenance, must be implemented by all the communities with a sanitation system and not only the largest of them. Last part, talking about the Blue Deal. As we all know, at the end of 2023, the European Commission put on the table a new plan, the Blue Deal, to improve water, wastewater, and stormwater systems, including their resilience facing climate changes. Unfortunately, in spring 2024, Peasant's consultation led the European Commission to withdraw this initiative. At the end of 2024, the newly Commission announced a plan for water and wastewater, mainly considering the resilience of countries against climate changes. In our opinion, it is better to finance infrastructures to prevent large flooding than indemnifying billions of euros to repair or replace what has been lost. So I hope that through this approach, referring to PPP, DERU 2 and Blue Deal, I've been able to provide answers, potentially solutions on those two key questions that were, as I said at the beginning, how to finance differently water infrastructure project and where should we focus on water infrastructure project while there is need everywhere, where technically speaking we can offer solutions and where the focus should be on. Thank you for listening, and if you have any question.
Thank you, Jean-François. I think Ondine, how shall we do it? Do we just take all the questions together for the two presentations? If
Yes.
that's the case,
I think
then
that's okay.
I think Fernando has a question. He has his hand raised, so I pass him the floor.
Okay, thank you. Jean-François, what is the spread, the scope of the global gateway? It is useful to finance projects outside Europe?
It is useful in a sense that there are many countries beyond Europe that also are suffering for a lack of infrastructure, whether the infrastructure, the existing ones are need for maintenance or just simply to build and develop new infrastructure. So Europe as such has got its own challenges, but beyond that, and I will talk from my own experience with SAD focusing not only but mainly on West Africa, for which when it comes to potable water, but beyond that, with wastewater and stormwater, there is also need for going through those types of funds, knowing as well that those countries, unfortunately, are not necessarily in the best position, financially speaking, also to raise fairly quickly funds and identifying funds for which there will be value for money. So we know, for instance, that there are countries that have a lot of pressure from the IMF. So they have constraints on the debt. They are getting challenged on a yearly basis. So identifying a proper solution with private sector, as long as I mentioned, altogether the funds could be guaranteed in a good way and also in a very quick way, because that's one of the matters I've not mentioned, but the time that is required for the existing models to set up proper fundings is also an issue, considering the indirect competition that we may have from China, for instance. So finding the right actors on the private side, being fairly quick in implementing the funding solutions and focusing on the right countries that are truly in the needs. And yes, outside of EU as well would be definitively one of the key.
Okay, so global gateway can assure the contractor or the concessionaire to do a project in the developing country, taking the risk of money change, currency, and political risk.
It is certainly not the only, but some of the reasons indeed for private sector. It might be complicated to have limited sort of guarantees. So yes, indeed, those examples that you have mentioning, that's something that ideally through the global gateway should be also ensured.
Yes, if I can say some words about that question. Today, Global Gateway is not organized to ensure a project, but we think it would be very interesting that they change their policy and they include insurance policy in the prestations they can offer to the countries. It would be very efficient, because today multilateral banks are very long to set up fundings. It's around 10 years, and we know that the Chinese can fund projects within 2 or 3 years, and for many of political leaders in developed countries, they want project to be funded and realized within the 5 years they are going to rule the country. So it's it would very efficient to have an insurance mechanism provided by Global Gateway to allow our companies to work in these countries instead of Chinese companies. But we need to convince Global Gateway and European Union to set up that insurance fund.
Fernando, you can go again.
Okay, thank you. Count on us to support your trying to get the Global Gateway as insurance resources. I would like to ask Fernando Bernaya. I think that this may be the interest of most of our audience. If foreign companies are allowed to participate in the CREMA program in Brazil in the federal or in the state level?
Yes, Fernando, of course, international companies are allowed to participate in the public biddings in Brazil in general, not only in CREMA contracts, but also in concessions and PPP. And I would say that is a target in the federal government planning. The idea is to enlarge the participation of international companies to turn the bidding process a more competitive bidding process, because especially regarding the bigger concessions and PPP contracts, there's no market in Brazil. There's no developed market in Brazil. There are few big companies that have the capacity to participate in this public bidding process. So yes, in general terms, I would say international companies are allowed to participate in this tender process. But of course, depending on the requirements in each case, but in general, I would say yes, and it's not just not just allowed to participate, but the government wants to have a more international companies participating in the Brazilian bidding process related to these concessions, PPP, and CREMA contracts.
In this case, there is a sovereign guarantee. It's a country guarantee on the contract.
Yes. In cases in which the contract, the payment mechanism in the contract has public payments during the contract performance, there is in most of the cases a robust guarantee system in order to mitigate the risks of related to default by public administrations, default payment by public administrations. So, of course, we have a problem related to the volatility of the current exchange, and this risk, I think, has been addressed by recent contracts in a good way, because there are very interesting mechanisms inside those contracts that can mitigate the risk of the volatility of the current exchange. But the risks involved in payment default by public administrations, that is a political risk, that can be mitigated through funds, public funds, that function as a guarantee for the private partners that public administrations will provide the public payments, and I think it's working. I think it's working depending on the project, but in general terms, I would say for those projects that demand a public commitment, public payment commitment, there are public guarantees in order to engage the the private sector participation.
Michel?
Thank you for giving me the floor. Just to introduce myself, I'm currently treasurer of CICA, but I spent 20 years with a French road construction company, Colas. And in this exercise, I had many contacts with the World Bank on those type of new ways of contracting of roads. And CREMA was born in Latin America, as the acronym suggests, means, if I'm not mistaken, Contrato de Rehabilitación y Mantenimiento. But you were right in mentioning that the World Bank was also interested in some other countries, and they have also tried to develop such contracts in other parts of the world, in particular in Africa. And they came up eventually with a kind of model of contract, which they, in the first place, they called it sample bidding documents to improve the maintenance of roads. This was based on a subdivision of maintenance activities in maintenance services, rehabilitation works, improvement works such as widening a road, and also emergency works. But these works did not were all financed by the employer. Now it looks like the World Bank is also investigating into other possibilities, and I think Fernando Vernaglia rightfully showed the continuity between traditional contracts, CREMA DBN, CREMA PPP, and concession. I think it's very interesting and very interesting approach. I think it can be a very good pedagogical tool for both employers and contractors. And I would suggest to Andine, when she prepares the next webinar, to mention this aspect to the World Bank, since they committed to participate in the next webinar on this issue. And possibly I would like also to involve some industrialized countries. I have in mind the UK, Denmark, the province of Alberta in Canada, that have tried with failures and successes to develop those type of performance-based contracts.
Andine?
Well, do we have any more questions? No? Well, if we don't have, then I will thank you very much for joining today's meeting. As I was saying, the meeting is recorded, so you can find it on CICA's social networks. And as Michel told you, we will try to organize another webinar in April or May with the participation of the World Bank. Well, meanwhile, I wish you the best day or afternoon, and see you soon, I hope.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Goodbye. Thank you.